Hi everyone, I'm Matt, and welcome back to Toylytics, where we take a look at the analytical side of toy collecting. In this video, we're going to specifically dig into the Wasteland wave sales of Mythic Legions figures from the second half of 2023. So let's take a look at what figures were released in this wave. This is a relatively small wave, probably the smallest one that we've looked at so far here on the channel. The pre-order period for this wave was April and May 2019. Several of the figures, the Motu tributes, Chronon Purplor, were PowerCon 2019 debut figures, and according to Source Horseman, some of these other figures, Thump and Torgan in particular, were available as early releases at other shows as well. But as you can see here, we only have 6 figures overall. One ogre scale figure, Archimedes, and then 5 regular scale figures. Thump, of course, is a goblin. So another wave that, similar to the Soul Spiller wave, which I covered in my last video, not really talked about a whole lot, but some of these figures have significant value, as we'll see when we look at the data itself. So let's go over to the data. Here we go. And the sales for the second half of 2023 turned out to be 155 overall from the figures in this wave. The smallest number was Torgan, not sold very often. The highest number was Archimedes, followed closely by Chronon and Purplor. So looking at the figures by the way, with the overall summary, notice there's only 6 characters here, and there's still 155 sales compared to 121 sales that we saw in the Soul Spiller wave, which had 8 characters. So as I mentioned in the video discussing that wave, that one really seems to be forgotten a lot of times by people, but this one, maybe a little bit more popular characters here. As far as the monthly sales by figure in this wave, as you can see, generally we're looking at somewhere between 1 and 9, so generally less than 10 of each of these figures is sold per month. Overall, for some reason, there's been a recent December recent Thump rush. I'm not really sure why that is the case. Maybe people are trying to dump the Thump. I don't know, but interesting to see what the data looks like as far as the actual prices that those are selling for. So we'll see that in a few screens here. Digging into the average price per wave, as you can see, some of these figures are going for pretty significant prices. Torgan and Cassie are probably the most popular as far as rarity and interest is concerned, even though not a lot of them are being sold, as we saw. Torgan overall has an average price of 122. Cassie are right behind with 121. Archimedes, not surprising that his price is relatively high because he was relatively high to begin with, since he's an ogre scale figure. Purplor, Chronon, following a lot of more recent Masters tribute trends of being, relatively on the lower end of the prices in the wave. Maybe again because more of those figures are bought initially. Who knows, right? It's hard to tell. And then Thump coming up in at the end with a price average of $54. So let's look at the individual sales for each of these figures. And we'll first go over to Archimedes. So as we said, Archimedes average price around $94, and basically he's been pretty stable here. We've got somewhere, between about 75 or so and up to 120. Notice some prices are a little bit higher than that, right? 131. This one's 131 as well. Again, these prices include shipping, so he's a heavier figure, so maybe people are charging a little bit more for shipping as well, which increases the prices compared to a regular standard figure. But regardless, generally people have been able to get Archimedes between about $80 and around 110 or 120. So if you see him, if you're interested in getting him, there really isn't much of a trend going on. So if you see him for 80 or 90, that might be a pretty good price. So let's move on to Cassia, everybody's favorite bucket-headed barbarian. As you can see here, seems to be trending up in price over time, right? So not, as we said, not a whole lot of sales, but earlier on in the summer, people were able to get her for sub 100. So a couple sales here, even new figures for sub 100. Even loose figures, though, recently haven't been selling for anything less than about 120, right? So generally, if you wanted a Cassia, you may want to hold off until the price goes down, maybe with some of the other Noble Bear figures releasing coming up. We'll see that price come down a little bit. Although, if people want variety, we don't have a figure releasing that looks a lot like Cassia, so maybe that price is going to continue to go up. It's hard to really tell, but in general, she definitely seems to be on an upswing. So if you see a price, if you really want a Cassia for your collection, you see a price that's less than 120, maybe around 110 or even 100, that seems like a pretty good deal, at least as far as current prices are concerned. All right, moving on to Krona. He's one, I've kept track of him a lot, and I've heard a lot of people say that Krona was one of the major figures that got them into the line. I know I've heard Emil Vickman talking about, if you know him from the Cabal and from the community overall, great sculptor, and painter, he mentions in various podcasts that Krona was one of the major figures that drew him into the line, due to the Trapjaw connection that he has. And for me too, right? Trapjaw was one of my favorite Masters figures, has been, and one of the major figures that got me into the line as well. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I started collecting around 2019, so around this wave. I wasn't around for the pre-order, but I was able to get a Krona from Big Bad Toy Store, one of the first figures that I did purchase in the line as well. So it's maybe a lot more of them were pre-ordered, a lot more of them were made, as far as why the prices are reasonably low, right, for a pretty popular character, although he might be one who doesn't fit a lot of tastes, right? So he's got a very sort of garish paint job if you don't like the Trapjaw connection, so maybe a lot of people don't really want to add him to their collection. But anyway, he's been selling somewhere between about $55 at the low end, really good price, right, just above the original retail from 2019, or 2020, I guess, when he was out, and all the way up to about 80, right? So not a whole lot of variation there, and not even any really large sales much above 80, right? This is really the only one here that's above 80, and that was about 85. So if you want a Krona, it's probably a pretty good time to get one. There's probably a lot of them out there as well for about anywhere from $60 to $80, and if you see one for kind of the lower end of that price, seems to be a pretty good time to pick one up. So moving on to Purplore. Purplore has about the same story as Krona, although Purplore has that additional orc head, so a lot of people like that as well, to be able to add some purple orcs to their collection. But in general, again, he's been selling between about $60 and $90, maybe a little bit higher than Krona. This one's kind of an outlier here for $117. Notice I've also filtered out any test shots as well in any of these figures themselves. I don't know if any test shots were actually sold for these, but certainly some test shots were sold for other figures. So I'm trying to make sure that I treat those separately. I'll be doing a separate test shot video sometime in the first quarter of 2024. But looking again at Purplore, maybe his price is coming down a little bit, right? Recent sales are around $65 to $70, or I guess about $60 to $65. So this again may be a good time if you see one for $60, $65. Probably a pretty good price for a Purplore, but you should be able to get one probably for $80 or below. All right, a couple more here. Moving on to Thump. All right, so as we said, right, here's the kind of run on Thump that we've seen in December or late November. Basically about $50 to $55, right? So many of these figures, all these figures here that were sold, like over 10 of them were sold between 50 and 55, and all of them are new. That's what the box means, the square. All of them are new figures as well. So this is a really good price for people that want to add a named goblin to their collection, especially any newer collectors out there. Getting a figure from 2019 that is just above, or basically right at the retail price now 5 years later, I think that's a pretty good deal. So, keep a lookout for some thumps if you're interested. In the past, he was going for a little bit more varied pricing, right? A little bit below $50 here in some instances, but even above, right? So some people were paying closer to 60, or this person for a loose one up to 77. Really needed to have one, I guess. But if you're interested in getting a thump, kind of add some variety to your goblin shelf, this is probably a pretty good time to get one. You should be able to get one for close to retail price. And then finally, bringing up the rear, we have Torgon, and not a lot of sales for Torgon, right? The lowest in the entire table, as we saw, but some of the highest prices, right? So especially if you want a new one, the cheapest new one that was sold, other than this one early on in the summer, the cheapest new that was sold recently in the past few months was this one here in December for $137. So if you want a new Torgon, you'd probably better get ready to pay for them. You can get a used one or a loose one a little bit cheaper than that, right? For $125 here. Here was $100 or so. So if you see a Torgon for somewhere around $100, even if he's loose, this may be your best chance to add one of him to your collection, because he doesn't come up for sale a whole lot, and when he does, the prices kind of reflect that lack of supply, because he tends to go for one of the higher prices in this entire wave. So that is it for the small wave of Wasteland figures in the second half of 2023. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to like and subscribe and all that stuff that other people say, I'm going to be recording some other ones here related to Cosmic Legions, Figure Obscura, as well as other Mythic Legions waves that will also be dropping in the next few days. So please, as I said, like and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with the figures that, or the analysis that I'm doing for the second half of 2023. I want to get these out as fast as possible while the data is as fresh as it can be. So I'm trying to be dropping one video at least every day, so that we're able to get these out as early as possible in January. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.